It is just after midnight on September the 3rd, 1939, and the air above the North Sea feels heavy and uneasy. The war has barely begun, yet something invisible is already moving through the darkness. You can almost feel the cold wind cutting across the water, hear the low hum of generators along the British coast, and sense that men are waiting for something they cannot see. Far from the front lines, in quiet rooms filled with wires, glowing tubes, and nervous engineers, a silent weapon is waking up. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. The enemy does not know it yet. The enemy does not even believe this weapon can exist. Only days earlier, in Berlin, senior officers of the Luftwaffe laughed at the idea. They dismissed it as British fantasy, a clever rumour meant to scare pilots. Machines that could see airplanes through clouds, darkness, and rain, from miles away? Impossible. Even dangerous to believe. And yet, on this cold night, one engineer's strange idea is about to prove them wrong in a way that will change the war forever. The story does not begin with explosions or dogfights. It begins years earlier, in a modest laboratory, with a quiet man who does not look like a warrior at all. His name is Robert Watson Watt. He is not a general. He does not wear medals. He is an engineer, a physicist, and above all, a problem solver. He speaks softly, thinks carefully, and spends most of his life surrounded by equations, radio waves, and half-built machines. No one watching him in the early 1930s would guess that he is building one of the most important defences in British history. In 1934, Europe is already tense. Adolf Hitler has taken power in Germany. The Luftwaffe is being rebuilt in secret, then openly. Bombers are growing larger, faster, and deadlier. In Britain, memories of the First World War are still fresh. Leaders fear one thing above all others: a sudden air attack on cities, with no warning, no defence, and no escape. The bomber will always get through, many experts say. It becomes an accepted truth, a terrifying one. Watson Watt does not accept it. At the time, he works at the radio research station in Slough, west of London. His job has nothing to do with weapons. He studies how radio waves move through the atmosphere, how they bounce, bend, and fade. It is quiet, technical work. But in early 1935, a question reaches his desk that changes everything. The British Air Ministry wants to know if a so-called death ray is possible. Could radio waves be used to destroy enemy aircraft in the air? Watson Watt knows the answer immediately. No, not with the power available, not even close. But instead of stopping there, he asks a more dangerous question. If radio waves cannot destroy an aircraft, could they detect one? It is a simple question, almost too simple. And that is why no one else has taken it seriously. Radio waves travel fast. They bounce off metal. Airplanes are made of metal. In theory, a radio signal sent into the sky should reflect back if it hits an aircraft. The problem is scale. The signal would be weak. The noise would be huge. The equipment would have to be sensitive, stable, and fast. Most experts believe it cannot be done in time to matter. Watson Watt thinks otherwise. On February 26, 1935, near a small village called Daventry in Northamptonshire, he sets up an experiment. There is no grand facility, and no military parade, just a radio transmitter, a receiver, and an RAF bomber flying back and forth in the distance. The weather is cold. The equipment is crude. The stakes are enormous. As the aircraft moves, the signal on the receiver flickers. Not much, just a faint disturbance. But it is there. The radio waves are bouncing back. The airplane is visible, not to the eye, but to the machine. That moment changes everything. Within weeks, Watson Watt is pulled into urgent meetings. Funding appears. Pressure increases. The Air Ministry wants results. Fast. Germany is rearming. Time is running out. Watson Watt and his small team are sent to the coast, where they begin building something that has never existed before. A wall of radio eyes stretching along Britain's eastern shoreline. They call it Chain Home. By 1936, tall steel towers begin to rise along the coast, from the Thames estuary up to Scotland. Each site looks strange and unsettling. 4 massive transmitter towers, some over 350 feet tall, stand beside smaller receiver towers. Thick cables run underground. Inside small huts, operators sit before glowing screens, listening to faint echoes from the sky. To a civilian, it looks like a science experiment gone wrong. To Watson Watt, it is the future of air defence. To the Luftwaffe, it is nonsense. German intelligence notices the towers. Pilots see them from the air. Reports are filed. Analysts debate their purpose. Some believe they are radio navigation aids. Others think they are long-range communication masts. A few suggest they might be some kind of early warning system. But the idea that they can detect aircraft at long range, that idea is dismissed. German radar development exists, but it follows a different path. Short-range systems, used mainly for ships and coastal defence. The concept of a nationwide integrated early warning network seems unrealistic, too complex, too fragile, too dependent on technology that could easily fail. And so the towers are ignored. Inside Britain, however, the system grows stronger. By 1938, Chain Home can detect aircraft at distances of up to 120 miles. It cannot tell height very accurately. It cannot track individual planes perfectly. But it does something far more important. It gives time to scramble fighters, time to choose where to defend, time to rest pilots instead of keeping them in the air all day. Time to win. Watson Watt understands this deeply. Radar alone does not shoot down planes. It does not explode. It does not kill. But it changes the rhythm of war. It allows the defender to move first instead of reacting blindly. As war draws closer, the pressure on the system increases. The equipment is sensitive. Vacuum tubes burn out. Power supplies fail. Operators need training. The data must flow quickly from radar stations to fighter command, then to squadrons on the ground. To solve this, Britain builds something just as important as the radar itself, a command and control network. At Bentley Priory, north of London, Fighter Command headquarters becomes the brain of the system. Information from Chain Home stations is filtered, plotted and displayed on large maps. Coloured blocks show enemy formations moving toward the coast. Controllers decide which squadrons to send, when and where. It is a living system, part machine, and part human judgment. Watson Watt watches this with a mix of pride and fear. He knows how fragile it all is. A single wrong assumption, a technical failure, or a misinterpretation could collapse the whole structure. And he knows the enemy is learning, even if they do not yet understand what they are seeing. In August 1940, that test finally comes. The Battle of Britain begins not with one massive strike, but with probing attacks. German bombers and fighters cross the Channel in waves. They test British defences. They look for weakness. Luftwaffe commanders still believe they can overwhelm the RAF through sheer force. What they do not see is the invisible net tightening around them. Each time German aircraft lift off from bases in France, Chain Home detects them within minutes. The echoes appear on screens. Operators call out bearings and ranges. Plots move across maps. RAF fighters are scrambled only when needed, not too early, not too late. Pilots climb straight into the path of the enemy instead of searching blindly. German pilots begin to notice something unsettling. The British are always there, over the coast, over the targets, even when clouds hide the ground, even when attacks are supposed to be a surprise. At first, they blame luck. Then they blame spies. Some suggest the British are reading radio traffic. A few suspect radar. But higher command remains unconvinced. They believe British radar, if it exists, is limited, unreliable, and easily destroyed. They are wrong. Watson-Watt's system is not perfect, but it is resilient. Even when radar stations are bombed, they are repaired quickly. Many attacks miss their true targets. Some towers are damaged but remain operational. Others are back online within hours. The Luftwaffe never commits fully to destroying the radar network because they never fully believe in it, and that disbelief is fatal. By September 1940, German losses are rising. Fighter pilots are exhausted. Bombers are intercepted again and again. The plan to destroy the RAF collapses. Hitler postpones the invasion of Britain. The moment passes. In quiet rooms along the coast, radar operators continue their work, unseen and largely uncelebrated. Watson-Watt does not claim victory. He knows the war is far from over, but he also knows that something extraordinary has happened. A theory, scribbled on paper just years earlier, has stood up against one of the most powerful air forces in the world. The Luftwaffe never truly believed it could work. And by the time they realized it had, it was already too late. As autumn deepens in 1940, the skies over Britain grow quieter, but the war behind the scenes grows louder. Inside radar stations, the work never stops. The rooms smell of hot electronics and damp uniforms. Operators rotate through long shifts, eyes fixed on faint green traces, ears trained to catch changes in tone that might mean life or death. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the sense that every small decision carries weight far beyond the room. Robert Watson-Watt rarely visits the front lines now. His role has changed. He moves between offices, briefing rooms, and laboratories, explaining, defending, and refining his system. He knows victory has made radar visible, and visibility brings danger. Enemies study success. Allies copy it. The quiet advantage of surprise is gone. In Germany, the disbelief finally begins to crack. By late 1940, Luftwaffe intelligence officers can no longer ignore the pattern. British fighters are not reacting randomly. They are not guessing. They are waiting. German pilots report interceptions that feel planned, precise, almost scripted. Bombers are met at altitude, sometimes before crossing the coast. This is not coincidence. German scientists already have radar of their own. Systems like Freya and Würzburg exist. Freya can detect aircraft at medium range. Würzburg can track targets with high accuracy. But these systems are used in isolation. They are technical tools, not part of a national defence web. There is no equivalent to Chain Home feeding a single command system that controls every fighter squadron. That difference matters more than raw technology. German radar stations work. British radar stations work. But Britain has built a nervous system. Germany has built organs without a brain. As the war expands, radar spreads with it. Britain adapts Chain Home for different needs. New systems appear, shorter range, more precise, designed to guide night fighters and track low-flying aircraft. Ground-controlled interception, or GCI, allows controllers to talk pilots onto enemy bombers in darkness. The sky is no longer safe just because the sun has set. Watson-Watt watches this evolution with mixed feelings. The engineer in him feels pride. The human in him feels unease. Radar is no longer just defensive. It is becoming a tool of pursuit. By 1941, the technology he helped create is crossing borders. British radar appears in North Africa, guarding ports and airfields against Italian and German attacks. Mobile radar units move with armies, scanning deserts and coastlines. At sea, radar begins to guide ships through fog and darkness, spotting enemy vessels long before they can be seen. Across the Atlantic, the United States takes notice. Even before entering the war, American officers visit Britain to study radar and air defense. They are stunned by how much depends on a few quiet rooms filled with wires and screens. Watson Watt and his colleagues share what they can. There is no time for secrecy among allies. The Luftwaffe, meanwhile, scrambles to adapt. German engineers improve their systems, refine frequencies, and experiment with countermeasures. They develop jamming equipment to confuse British radar, dropping strips of metal foil, known later as chaff, to create false echoes. For a time, it works. Radar screens fill with noise. Operators struggle to separate real aircraft from illusions. But even here, the advantage lies with the defender. British scientists respond quickly. They adjust frequencies, change techniques, and train operators to read through the clutter. Radar becomes a duel of minds, not machines. Each side pushes, the other adapts. Watson Watt himself steps back from day-to-day development during the later war years. Others carry the work forward, but his influence remains everywhere. The idea that information, not just firepower, wins battles has taken root. You can see it clearly in the air war over Germany itself. By 1943, Allied bombers cross into heavily defended airspace, guided by radar navigation systems that allow them to find targets through clouds and darkness. On the ground, German radar tracks them, directing fighters and flak. The sky becomes crowded with invisible beams, overlapping signals and electronic tricks. War has moved into a new dimension. The Luftwaffe's early disbelief now feels like a distant memory. Radar is no longer doubted. It is feared. And yet, even as radar grows more powerful, its limits remain clear. It cannot think. It cannot decide. It depends on people, on tired operators, on commanders under pressure, on engineers fixing broken parts at 3 a.m. Watson Watt always understood this. He never claimed radar was magic. He called it the means of avoiding unnecessary effort. That philosophy shapes how Britain fights. Fighters are not wasted on empty skies. Pilots are rested when possible. Resources are used with care. In a long war, and that efficiency saves lives. After 1945, when the guns finally fall silent, radar does not disappear. It spreads into civilian life. Airports use it to guide planes safely. Ships rely on it to avoid collisions. Weather radar tracks storms. Air traffic control becomes possible on a global scale. The quiet engineer's wartime invention reshapes the modern world. Watson Watt himself fades from public attention. He receives honours, titles, recognition, but he never becomes a household name. He remains, at heart, the same man who once stood in a field near Daventry, watching a flicker on a screen and realising the future had just whispered back. Looking back, it is tempting to focus on battles, aces and heroes in the sky, the roar of engines, the clash of wings. But beneath all of that noise, something quieter decided the outcome. A signal bouncing off metal, a calculation made in seconds, a warning given just early enough. The Luftwaffe never believed it could work because they were trained to think in visible terms: planes, bombs, speed, and firepower. Radar asked them to believe in absence, in echoes, in ghosts made of energy. By the time they accepted it, Britain had already woven those ghosts into a shield. You can almost imagine that first night again: the dark sea, the cold wind, the towers standing silent against the stars. Somewhere inside, a trace appears on a screen. A calm voice reports it. Fighters scramble. History shifts, quietly, without announcement. One engineer did not win the war alone, but he changed how wars are fought, and sometimes that is even more powerful. If you listen closely, even today, you can still hear it. Not the sound of engines or guns, but the steady pulse of a signal reaching out into the dark, waiting for an answer. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.